In the meantime, while Lokesh is joining from India, may I suggest that we start the conference by both of you giving an introduction about yourselves, and please don't be modest. This is a platform where we need to know who you are, what your accomplishments are, and how you've been contributing to society. Dr. Nahara, if I can have you start it off, that would be terrific.
Yes, I see that my title is pretty extensive here on the screen, but anyway, I'm Yutaka Nihara, and I'm a physician who was quite interested in sickle cell disease and developed a treatment for sickle cell disease, which was approved in 2017 by the FDA. Since then, we have expanded this to Israel and into Middle East. We are now trying to move over to India and hopefully into Africa before too long. I'm also on faculty at UCLA since 1992. At the same time, with the technology transfer program, we started the company to distribute this medication that we had developed in the laboratory at UCLA. Thank you.
Peter, if you would be so kind as to give us your introduction.
Sure. I'm a little different. I'm a biomedical engineer by training. I've been doing this about a little over 40 years. What I love to do, and I've worked at big companies or run large labs, and I've done about 4 startups for the last 25 years, and got lucky with a few of them, sold them to large companies. But I really like to do things that really impact human health and make a real difference in people's lives, especially the ones we don't ever meet them, they never meet us, but we know in our hearts that we made a difference in their lives. And what I really love to do is to take high-end, complicated, expensive equipment, make it very low cost, make it affordable, make it very high quality, easy to use. And I've done that again and again. And it seems like a lot of people don't like doing that, but I really love that. And I've done about 50 products. I also at about 3 of the major U.S. universities. I'm on their translation committees. I help them figure out which products in the lab really should move out into the world, become startups or become part of industry, because things in the lab are great, but unless they actually get to patients, they don't have any impact. And so that's what I really care about, is actually getting things that actually impact patients.
Very nice.
I'm going to promote Patty White be able to join the panel, because I think Patty is with Peter, and I think she'll have something good to add to this. The moderator for the panel is going to be Professor Sabu Padmadas from the University of Southampton, and he has joined us and should be online in a second. And in the meantime, we have one more person adding in from Novartis. So Sabu, it's over to you, and are you on?
Yeah, so nice to see you all. So I'm Sabu Padmadas. I'm a professor of demography and global health. So demography is my area, but I'm also the associate dean international within the University of Southampton. And I'm also founding director of the University India Center for Inclusive Growth and Sustainable Development. And global health is actually very close to my heart. But particularly, I think, thanks to many colleagues, I think, who have really joined the mission to drive the sickle cell initiative. I think because, this is an important, very important disease, but yet we know that it is neglected from, in many sense. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity. I'll stop there, and I look forward to catching up further. Yeah.
Very good.
Right. So as we all know, India has launched the sickle cell anemia elimination mission. This is a vast public sector undertaking looking at sickle cell, and I think that after decades of global neglect in this area, we are finally seeing some forward motion. And in India, in a big way, with the start of it is with mass testing in tribal populations, and then expanding that into non-tribal populations. So initially 70 million people are being tested going forward. And then we expect that number to go up to several hundred million mass testing patients, and then full treatment provided by the government as a public health initiative. I will turn this to you, Sabu, first for your comments, and then we can hear from everybody else involved.
No, sure. Thank you, Anand. I think, well, I just recall the date, the 8th of May, 1980, when we managed to, when the whole world managed to get rid of smallpox. That was the eradication. And now, exactly at this point in time, the government of India, probably under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, they have really launched a mission to eradicate sickle cell by 2047. It's a very ambitious plan, but yet it is doable with collaboration. I think particularly scientists, pharmaceutical companies, and then stakeholders, everyone coming together. But if you look at, for instance, I think following the smallpox, we had two major pandemics. I think one was HIV/AIDS, and then and HIV could have been another pandemic, but it is again confined into various geographical zones. Then we have COVID, and so in those priority, I think when government prioritizes these pandemics and epidemics, then sometimes what happens is that the neglected tropical diseases, such as the sickle cell, can actually be a grave omission. And I think that's where there is a realization, particularly in today's world, where we thrive for an equality and equity in healthcare delivery. Because the question is that how can we really make healthcare affordable, accessible to everyone? So in that respect, I think it's of course it's a moral obligation of academicians, scientists, pharmaceutical leaders, industry leaders, everyone to come together to join this mission. But if you look at, for instance, what happened in the last 30 years, I mean, well, I'm actually in front of two stalwarts, Dr. Nihara and Mr. Gallan. I think we have really pioneered certain key initiatives for the for tackling or treating sickle cell disease. But well, I think first of all, what we need is that promotion at the population level, and that's number one. The second is that, well, how do you really ensure that there is adequate leadership and and response from top governments, I think, so that they prioritize this important initiative and support the mission. So I think so that's my opening remarks. But I also have this question of, given particularly in the ESG framework, what kind of challenges do we foresee? I mean, when we have a product in place, and when we know that, well, this is a rare disease, but it is really, I mean, I happen to see a number of patients who are suffering from sickle cell. And I think for the first time, I got really kind of carried away by the episodes of pain, by the frequency of blood transfusion that they require. More importantly, the quality of life and well-being is under big threat. And so I think the point here is that each and every life matters, regardless. And it is a responsibility of governments and an industry to really come together to provide that equity in healthcare. So I think I would first of all ask this big question of, when we have an innovation in place, that how do we really, what are the steps that we need to really, consider to really, to take this to the next level, so that it is promoted widely within public, and that public information is important. And the second is that I mean, sometimes, there's tend to be kind of competition in the field. So how do we really, ensure that, well, the public is well informed, the providers are well informed, the physicians are trained, so that we can have a smooth journey towards that mission?
I think I'll just speak briefly on that. I think those are wise words and very important questions, because, for example, in industry, there's competition. All of us are trying to come up with answers, but I consider it we're competitors, but we're also allies because we all have the same mission, and nobody has a, we all don't have the same solution. Different problems and different populations require different solutions, and so I think the competition is actually very healthy because it gets us to get optimum solutions. What works in a small village may not work in Delhi, for example. And so you really want to have different problems. Some places the infrastructure is in place to do mass screening with centralized machines. In some places you need point of care testing, and so you need both. And so I actually I see it as we're synergistic. It's the magic. This is the good part of capitalism. Capitalism has its bad parts, but this is the good part. Is the competition actually creates better solutions.
Thank you, Peter. Over to you, Dr. Nihara.
Yes, I agree with Peter. Thank you, Sabu. I agree with Peter that competition is good. Competition, especially done in more of a cultural way. And also collaboration is important. There are 3 levels that I can think of from my experience should be fixed. One is, of course, FDA or regulatory body. I really think that needs to be fixed. Number 2 is the dominance of the pharmaceutical company, the large pharmaceutical company. Number 3 is the system of funding these studies. And I hope I'm not offending anybody at the FDA, but right now, well, for example, if aspirin were tried to go through FDA approval today, probably it's going to take either 20 or 30 years or might maybe never get approved. But how important aspirin is. If penicillin were to go through FDA process, I think it's going to go through a hard time. I think safety is very, very important, which is usually taken care of by a phase 1 study. But after that, there are too many people who are either not interested in the disease or is not knowledgeable enough about disease, try to come up with all the obstacles for good ideas to go through to get to patients. I think this whole system needs to be revamped so that patients will have easier access. And also, it should be revamped so that pharmaceutical companies shouldn't have to spend $1 billion to get a medication through the FDA approval, especially if it's safe and effective.
Right. Thank you.
Exactly. I don't know. Number 2 is the dominance of the big pharmaceutical company. Well, I'm sure the pharmaceutical company, when they started with good ideal. And I will not name some of the pharmaceutical companies, but when they start to find interest in our company, they would come and send some of those people. But I can tell that those people who are supposedly be looking at a new product for their company, they are not equipped with adequate knowledge of the disease nor physiology to really understand what's going to work. They cannot carry on conversation with true experts. So in my opinion, like a disease like sickle cell disease, there are many great assets that really should be promoted, yet something that is more complicated and kind of fancy, some people use the word sexy, gets promoted, such as gene therapy, CRISPR, and they're very important. I'm not trying to take anything away from it, but before going to complicated gene therapy, CRISPR, I would say 100, there are at least half a dozen great practical, safe treatment that's available. But pharmaceutical companies don't go for these for some reason. Of course, our agent is one of those examples that we kind of had to carry it all the way to the approval. Once we approve, a lot of people want it, but by then we know what the pharmaceutical company is all about, so we rather do it ourselves. Number 3 is the funding agencies, venture capitals, and also a lot of institutional investors. They were more or less controlled by other investors rather than true scientific knowledge. It's almost like a, government trying to control the lives of women rather than the doctors and patients. But investors try to dictate what products should go up, even though many of the analysts for the investors don't really know, again, the disease, know the physiology, and frequently they make bad decisions. But for bad products, billions and billions of money can actually flow, even if it fails, because they make the money in the process rather than when the medication gets to the patients. So these are the three areas that I can think of that really needs to be changed, especially for the rare disease. So I will reiterate one more time. First, regulatory body really needs to be fixed so that good agent, especially when it is developed by somebody who really know what they're doing, don't have to raise $1 billion to get the medication into the world. Number two, dominance of big pharma. I don't know how this can be done. Really needs to be looked at very, very carefully, because their dominance sometimes even sabotage some of the good agents. And if I'm being too frank about this, I really apologize. And then the funding agencies, I think a funding agency needs to be guided so that they'll fund the products that will actually get to the finish line and help the patients, rather than they'll fund for the material where investors can make money in the process of going through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trial.
Thank you, Yutaka. I think the other key question that I have is that, well, now India presents a huge opportunity. Now, if you look at, for instance, the sickle cell disease, I think understanding the disease, and in fact, I think also looking at the etiology is well understood now, and I think it's a blood genetic disorder, and it would take time actually. So the Prime Minister's ambition of having everything sort of tackled by 24/7 is actually quite an ambitious goal, but yet it is possible, because by that time we would be able to promote the right knowledge actually to prevent and detect early detection. Now, India has actually embarked on a very important mission aiming to test 700 million people. And that's actually substantial, huge. And, and India being the most populous country on the planet now, we don't know. I mean, probably the sickle cell trait or the disease, whatever it is, I think it's probably, completely underestimated the actual numbers. The actual numbers could be substantially large. So that's why testing is important, but at the same time, when testing is done, and when we are successful in testing, and when we are successful in diagnosing the disease, then the question is that, are we ready? Are the markets ready to step in and then take the next actions? So, for instance, in this case, particularly initiating the therapies at the right time and so on. So, as industries, I think, or as a product inventors, what do you think are the opportunities in India? Because there's no doubt we have actually taken a leap forward in this particular space. But what are your thoughts of the opportunities that are in India? Peter, could you please respond to this?
Sure. India's complicated. India's complicated both because it's big, but also because in hemoglobin mutations is complicated. Mm-hmm. It has sickle cell, it has beta thalassemia, it has hemoglobin E, and there's many others, but those are the big ones. And whether you have sickle cell disease or you have trait of any of these kinds, you have to be careful, because who you marry and who you have children with will really determine whether people are born with disease. So it's really important that we think about this in a broad context. Now, 1,000 people a day die from sickle cell related disorders in the world. This is, it turns out that the problem is much bigger than any of us thought. It just was a recent article in Lancet that really said that there's a huge problem in India, in sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, and then around the world with migration. And so it's really critical that we think about this as a problem. We're finding people with disease so they can be treated. We're finding people with trait so that they can be careful who they marry and have children with. Because if you can't eliminate it just by treating the disease, you have to eliminate it by preventing children being born with the disease. And so we really think that that's a critical thing, is to be able to look for beta thalassemia trait, hemoglobin E trait, and sickle cell trait to really be able to deal with this. And so that makes it a complicated problem, but a doable problem.
Let me jump in really quickly and introduce Lokesh Kumar. Lokesh is with Novartis India, and Lokesh, I'm going to have you give your introduction, but it is a pleasure to have met Lokesh and to see the impact that he has guided through Novartis in India. And Lokesh, if you would be so kind as to give your introduction and a little bit about the impact you've done and how you are also looking to participate in India with and looking at sickle cell specifically.
Thank you so much, Anand. And sincere apologies for having come in late. Technology keeps testing you, however good you are at it, Okay, so I've been in the industry, pharma industry through and through for more than 2.5 decades, more than 2 decades into commercial business, managing various roles across organizations like AstraZeneca, Novartis, and Abbott. If you ask me, the most gratifying times of life has been the last 6 years where I've been with Arogya Parivar. What do we do in Arogya Parivar? We have adopted approximately 22,000 villages across the country. And there are 19 subjects or 19 different therapy areas that we talk about, because going to the base of anything to understand, the biggest challenge in the healthcare industry today is the lack of awareness. You know that more than 70% of the population resides in the rural hinterlands, and it's very difficult for them to forget about making a living happen, but they don't even know what are the first signs and symptoms of the toughest of diseases, which initially can, if interjected, where they could lead a normal life. So we selected around 18, 19 therapy areas. We talk about it. We have 700 people on the ground. I would encourage you to go deep in details if you want to know. It's a Harvard case study, none other than the most decorated professor Porter written this case about the sustainable business models and how you can shape the healthcare ecosystem. And as I'm talking to you, while we are moving from 18 different therapy areas. We wanted to see how focused we can work and see how best we can invest our resources. We are now focusing on sickle cell, leprosy, malaria, and a part of our effort is on avoidable blindness. So I wish to be very brief on this. We'll try get into the subject and then move on. As I get topics to speak about, I shall take some examples and narrate. Thank you so much, Anand. And wonderful to be amongst the decorated people over here.
Thank you, Lokesh. So I'm Sabu Padmadas. I'm the Associate Dean International here at the university, but I'm also a Professor of Demography and Global Health. And I'm so happy to be delighted to be part of this. And well, along with side, so perhaps I think Peter and Yutaka, you may want to just say a few words so that everyone is on the, everyone knows each other quickly.
Yes, I'm Yutaka Nihara. I was trained at UCLA in hematology oncology, and I have been doing research in sickle cell disease since 1992. And our research led to development of Endari, which is now approved in US and most countries in Middle East. And we are moving on to wider distribution in the world. We hope that we can get into India because of its safety, effectiveness, and practicality. Thank you.
Peter?
And I'm Peter Galen. I'm the co-founder of Hemex Health and developer of the Gazelle, which is a point of care diagnostic test for sickle cell, beta thalassemia, hemoglobin E, that is very low cost. And I think what's exciting is we decided that we wanted to be an international company, we really cared about India. So we thought it was only fair that we actually do over half of our R&D in India. We started off with Tata Elxsi in 2016, and we've been working with them now for 7 years. We do all our worldwide manufacturing in India. We think it's really fair and just from a viewpoint. Not only do we want to help people with sickle cell, but we want to actually help the communities that we're part of by doing the real work in the community. So we're a U.S. company that is made in India. So
Oh, that's very nice.
Thank you. Yeah.
One of the things that and the reason why the three of you are on with Dr. Sabu is the fact that all three of you have recognized that public health and India are a challenging aspect, and that means that profit cannot be the guideline, and that you're genuinely looking to help in an initiative. In this particular case, the sickle cell initiative, and all of you have developed technologies that are specific for public health, and that they are looking at solving a complex problem. So I would like you to kind of address that, if you would, in how you are actually taking these your products, which are much more profitable in other markets, and specifically creating them for this public health initiative. So if we can start with Dr. Nihara.
Thank you. And nice to meet you, Lokesh. And it's always good to talk to Peter and Sabu too. So, well, I started out as a physician, and I was just so devastated when I first saw sickle cell patients in my training. And that's my motivation for doing something for them. So Anand actually had to scold me. You have to make sure not to giving everything for free, but you have to be viable as a business. But at the same time, you have to have a public health interest, which is my interest. I didn't really know that what I was doing was really a public health work, because I was trying to just help sickle cell patients who actually became my friends. And as Peter was saying, it's complicated, and every patient is different. Every combination of genetic makeup is different, social makeup is different. And actually, there are many things we can do even before we get to any anti-sickling medication to help these patients. I mean, that's what we do in the medical field. And as an extension of this, we looked into the physiology of red blood cells and so forth. We knew that US, this disease is very important. At the time, American pharmaceutical companies weren't interested, but our focus was beyond US patients. At the time, we did not know about India too much, but we knew Africa has some 20 million patients. So what kind of medication can actually reach patients in Africa? So we have to look for a target that can be handled by some agent that is first effective and safe, but also practical. Not like a complicated, expensive injections, but something that you can give orally, and blood testing can be minimal. It was something that kind of like naturally came to our mind, because we were, I don't want to sound like a cocky, but we were really patient focused. What can be the best for the patient? I mean, we were very happy when hydroxyurea came in the market in 1997. We said, oh, finally, after 50 years of understanding the genetic makeup of sickle cell disease, we have something for patients, because sickle cell disease is one of the oldest, or it is the oldest disease where we knew the disease from the DNA analysis. And then, compared to like HIV or other disease, it was just remarkable. And then, we kept going. By then, we also had the proof of concept, but we said that hydroxyurea is really, really good because the disease is so terrible. But then we can continue to improve on this. But in any case, public health is very, very important view. And I'm going to finish by saying this, and I hope I don't embarrass Anand. You know, I was thinking like very capitalistically. We make some money in US and then we'll give away medication to Africa and all these places. When I shared this story, Anand got really, really mad at me. You know, well, not really mad, but scolded me. No, I mean, you know, public health is not like that. I mean, you can make it viable and you can make it economically sound. You know, margin may not be so big, but otherwise this is not going to survive. And I really agree. So public health extends not just helping patients, but also success as a business. May not make a lot of money per capita, but enough to make money to expand and also to provide a lot of jobs to many local people.
Thank you. I think Peter, perhaps you could reflect on that.
Yeah, we took a very different approach to what most companies do. We believe in reverse innovation. We actually did all of our research and market understanding in India. We spent a few months just looking at the Indian market, trying to talk to people in labs in small villages, really trying to understand what they needed. So it really we changed the product we developed. So we didn't try to develop a product for the US and then make it work in India. We developed a product in India and now we're bringing it to the US. So we did a lot of things differently because in India, a lot of places we went to didn't have refrigeration that was easy. And so we designed our instrument to work up to 45 degrees C. The supplies are stable and our tests are stable for several years at 45 degrees C. So we had to work in a dusty environment. We made sure our machine used the same connector and the same charging as a cell phone, because everybody can charge their cell phone. And but we also wanted to do innovation. So we made it in a digital machine. So even on reports, we put a QR code. So you could, if you don't have any other kind of digital information, if you have a camera, you can gather the information and do it. You really want to think inside the environment. How do you make it really work in India? And how do you make it work in a complicated, disjointed, because there's so many labs and they're not all tied together. So how do you build it so that you can really keep track of what's going on and do better patient care? It really requires thinking differently and spending lots of time in India.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made a very important point regarding the complexity and heterogeneity of the population. And in fact, India is a continent, and each state is a country of its own. And Lokesh did mention about, you did highlight the challenges in promoting the product, especially generating awareness, etc. So we need that scientific research to really also come in, so that it gets, how a product is particularly accepted in a society is driven by science alongside various promotional methods. Like that also includes a collaboration that we talked about this morning, but a few minutes ago, but also that wider engagement with key stakeholders. Lokesh, you may have some reflections on, you did mention about awareness, but do you think that will, for instance, I think alongside when we bring in research along with the product, I think would that make a difference?
Oh, yes, certainly. First of all, thank you so much for getting me onto the focus of what I was really itching to talk about. We probably might be so well placed and we may have infinite resources in terms of being able to spend for what the disease need to be treated as. And for sure, I know it is a dream in terms of looking for an elimination. The reason is that the cohorts that you have to address are those who are in hinterlands, deep hinterlands, where awareness is a huge challenge. And you wouldn't be in a position to even reach them so very easily. I'll give you one of the examples, one of those things that we did in the recent past is we traveled to Vizag, and it's a hamlet of around approximately a district which is now carved out. There are 300 villages which comes into the orbit of that. And you would be surprised to know today we talk about the statistics which reflect to the tune of 19 to 21%, but there are cases where probably the rates would go as high as 41%, but none of them are ready to come out of it. And they say it's a kind of fate that's bestowed on us. We need to live with it, and it's fine. We don't even want to come out of it. So how best you get into their minds to make their heart beat for what you want them to learn, and then come in continuum of care is very important. So I'll give you another example. We had a wonderful molecule called crizanlizumab, which is for vaso-occlusive crisis and recurrent vaso-occlusive crisis. And there were few governments who were super active in terms of procuring and keeping it. But unfortunately, and now I'm talking about the one of the biggest wider gaps, that HCPs are not so well trained in terms of administering this product. And then how do they follow up and deal with some of the side effects in case if they occur? And that prevented them from using it. And most of the stocks were written back. So these are the challenges that currently which are plaguing. And one of those things that we need to do is call out and recognize, realize, and then understand how you bring that ecosystem and partners together. Like I had a wonderful opportunity of witnessing Gazelle. Like I never ever dreamt that a device of that nature could exist. And probably now it's time for us to quickly put our minds onto the table, distill our wisdom of what we experienced. I'll also give this example because I sometimes wonder how Africa could do so well, because we have a weekly connect with them. They've been instrumental in terms of experimenting all these things. They're putting lots of plans in place. In fact, I'm so glad to let you know that we wish to follow the footprints of what our African teams have done so well. So this is the time for us to realize, recognize, understand, and don't underplay it. Like awareness is not so very important. Government has fund, so we'll go and do what we want. So that's what I want to do.
Yeah, thank you, Lokesh. And also, Dr. Nihara, I think if you look at, for instance, I think in today's position in India today, I think the ministries, like for instance, Ministry of Tribal Affairs, Ministry of Health, and even the Prime Minister has really stepped in, actually has taken this responsibility of really tackling this problem. So that means like there is considerable political support there. Now, I think, but on the other hand, we also need to look at it from a patient's perspective, because what is good for the patient, and that patient may differ from one who is one who is living in the United States versus one in Africa and one in India, and India being far more complex because most of these sickle cell trait carriers are all tribal populations, which are very hard to reach and so on. So as you're trying to really resolve this issue with that wonderful product Endari, I think, which is really making positive, already we can see some positive developments in terms of its efficacy, that how do we really take that and at that level, at that bottom level of the society? And of course, you need channels to disseminate. But from an industry perspective, what are your kind of views in terms of the approaches, the strategies that you would like to really consider?
Well, thank you very much for asking me this question. I think, medications like hydroxyurea and Endari, people think that they are not a big development, but they really have changed the lives of sickle cell patients. And also, they are so in line with public health. And we need more thinkers in that direction. This was not any of our doing, but India government took interest in sickle cell disease, and for many sickle cell patients, not just for India but throughout the world, this is a very fortunate event because India is probably the government that took sickle cell so seriously, and if India does this, I think other countries, other healthcare professionals, other public health officers are going to start to look into sickle cell disease a little bit more worldwide. We really have to take advantage of this opportunity. And this is the time to really put a lot of people's effort into developing more effective medication, because I've said this over and over, hydroxyurea and Endari, if we combine, we have better results than one or the other alone in many patients. And I think if we can combine maybe another effective, and I shouldn't say simple, but effective and practical medication, we may be able to eradicate sickle cell crisis altogether. And that's where things are. We are just beginning of this solution stage for sickle cell disease. or in case of HIV, it only took like 5 years going from definitively deadly disease to quite manageable chronic disease, where if you take proper medication, they're going to live out their expected lifespan without any problem, type of thing. I really think that sickle cell disease can be like that. And the current attitude or the current disposition of Indian government might be the key to change the lives of sickle cell disease all over the world. Because I can't think of any other countries, of course, including United States or Europe, that took sickle cell disease so seriously and also so publicly, you know. Company like Dr. Lokesh and myself, and it's in a way a competition, but also it can be a collaboration. Like Peter was saying, competition really helps, and sometimes competition can be a collaboration, just like a baseball game. When you have another pitcher that's really good, you want to be better than them, but at the same time, you help each other, teach each other how to pitch and stuff like that. And our goal is the same. We both try to make something that's really good and practical, and then hopefully we can combine it for synergy and work with the government. Yeah, this is really a huge opportunity, I believe.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No, absolutely. I think you said it absolutely right. And Peter, I think in terms of the combined tests that you've developed, I mean, and you're already aware of the complexity of dealing with, such testing process in India. What are your thoughts in terms of really, taking the tests so that, well, we don't exclude anyone? Like, and what, because, we are talking about an economy of scale as well, because, it's really, so we have to be thinking more in terms of commercial viability as well as a social impact. I think that so ESG becomes very, very prominent. And I know that the industries are struggling sometimes to understand the framework in which how ESG operates. But what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, I think we have to make them easy to use, something that you could disperse through the country, and very affordable. Those are key elements to do it, besides having the government programs that support this. But maybe I'll bring this back to real patients and maybe a couple stories, because why these are important. In one of our clinical studies, we had somebody that the study people came back and said we missed somebody who had disease, and there was a real problem. And so we asked for follow-up, because when we looked at the data, it didn't look right. It looked like the person didn't have disease. And turns out that when they sequenced this person, and we were actually correct, this person did not have disease, but they had been treated for 20 years as though they had disease, and it turns out it was a transcription error. So how do you build the systems that work right? Somebody here was taking drugs they shouldn't have been taking for a long time. We have another story where we had a doctor who had a patient, a 9-month-old, that they were very worried about. They sent their tests off to get results. It took a month to get back the results. And in that month, the baby died. So I think how do you make the system work, and how to make it work rapidly, you can get results back. And I think as a company, you want to be very responsive to issues that come up. Everybody's going to have issues. There's going to be questions like thinking that we missed somebody with disease. In that case, we didn't. No product's perfect. We want to be really, we want to be humble and say, okay, how do we, if there's issues, is it our problem? Is it their problem? How do we make this really work? Because for me, I'm old. The life of a child is much more precious, and the importance to their family than my life. And so I think all of us need to dedicate ourselves to really making that change and making lots of families who will never know happier and better.
Right. That's a very, very an excellent answer. And thank you, Peter. I think because I know I'm cautious of the time, but just I think a quick reflection and Lokesh, I think well being as you are heading the India operations there, and how do you see the global partnerships? I mean, how do you see that we can make the best use of that global partnership to address this very pertinent public health challenge? Because I think from a public health promotion perspective, there are huge challenges. I mean, creating awareness about various options, about the disease itself, about the treatment options, about the follow-ups, and as well as dealing with referrals. I think we haven't really covered that referrals, because that's really an ocean in terms of the complexity. But what are your thoughts in terms of how can we leverage the global partnerships to address this within the Indian context?
Yes. That's exactly one of those points that I touched while I was speaking a while ago. One of those things which I really was impressed is about Africa, the kind of work that they have done. And then if you have to come to India, there are a few states which have done extremely well. You look at Gujarat, they are ahead of curve in terms of understanding. If you ask me how the Honorable Prime Minister could see that coming in and the kind of work that has happened in Gujarat, and he was very sure it could be replicated. The only thing it needed a conviction. And then and many of the people, like when I was speaking to the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, I was pleasantly surprised to know that they have invited around 8 partners from different walks of life, one from research, one from diagnostics, one from academic institution, one from pharmaceutical industry. Very clearly, it says the kind of heterogeneous group which comes together are those people who will have the ability to distill that wisdom that needs to be put on the table, and how best we can get these plans to shape the ecosystem at the earliest possible. And as I tell you, most important is reaching the cohorts. Second is creating awareness. Third is bringing them into the continuum of care. Fourth is making sure that they stay and the treatment goes on. Fifth is, for example, there are a certain set of people who are already impacted. What do? Can you interject and see whether prenatal interjection would really help? And or otherwise, there are people who are already suffering. What kind of treatments that they really need? And what kind of model support systems that need to fall in place? There are a few governments who have done a phenomenal job. You look at government of Andhra Pradesh, they give you a pension, which is good enough for entire family to survive, even if there's one patient. Could these things be replicated? And when we come together and sit across the table, we should be in a position to openly discuss and talk about it. And then probably learn from certain models that countries like Africa has put in place. And then come together and see how best we can pick up those points which really matters for a country like India. As you rightly mentioned, it's a country of unfathomable diversity. And it's so very difficult to get in because each state has its own dynamics, and each cohort, each tribe has its own dynamics. It's not so very easy addressing that. But the best thing I like is the people sitting across the panel over here brings different kinds of expertise from different walks of life. So today, I don't have an expertise when it comes to diagnostics. I don't have an ability to understand in case if I have to have a measurement and evaluation in one place for the project that I do, and how I replicate to see if those things could be scaled up. So, for example, I come from a pharma industry. I know that I'll give an example, like one of the biggest misses how we need to identify. It's a 2-decade-old molecule, if you ask me, or more than that, the hydroxyurea. In India, we don't have a pediatric hydroxyurea. There are 16 companies which are promoting hydroxyurea, but none of them have bought pediatric hydroxyurea. Why? The biggest question is the stability. The second is the amount of research that they need to put in place to get the stability. And because it has got certain important indicators when it comes to the kinetics of the drugs. How we can just sensitize those organizations to think beyond the life of making commercial viable propositions, to think about bringing these kind of molecules. Now, when I wish to bring in to the country, there are again constraints. Could that be green channeled? Then government needs to pitch in and tell us, okay, you don't worry about it. Get the molecule at a price that which matches the affordability index of the people who are there in the country, or we would freely distribute, but get it at a price. But we will not put you through the hassles of going through the paying the duty, registering. There are many formalities that you put in place. So all in all, how best all of us can come together, help government to understand, seek their advice, call out what is the current deficits in the system and how they can help us catalyze these actions And to see that, we put a map on the plate, map on the, radar for those people who make decisions.
No,
Yeah, one of the,
excellent.
I want to kind of jump in real quickly and say that, we had a earlier panel today in this program in which was led by the person who is right now heading tribal health and joined by colleagues from the top hematologists from the top institutions in India, most of whom are on regulatory committees. And are actually planning and focusing the sickle cell mission in India. And I think a similar question was brought up in saying, are you prepared? Are you ready for the challenge? Because as you do more testing, you're going to have more findings. Obviously, these numbers are going to go higher. And while significantly and for a reason, the initial focus is on tribal health, but we have known from our own findings and from conversations, from data, that the problem is not restricted to tribal areas and to tribals. That it is a far-reaching problem, and now again, if you add into this thalassemia and other hemoglobin disorders, it becomes quite difficult. So evaluation of this, and so the government has done a gap analysis, and the government is aware of some of the gaps that are there. But I agree with Lokesh, and I think that more conversations need to happen, and that is the reason why we have started forming real think tanks globally to be able to take this at a local level. So while there are global think tanks that bring best practices from around the world, the problems have to be solved locally by people that are on a day-to-day basis experiencing issues that may not have any commonality to Europe or to Africa or to the US or any other part of the world. And I think that that's where we have focused ourselves in saying that we need to bring in more stakeholders. The government needs to be a part of these think tanks. We can't have government think tanks because government think tanks don't work. We need to have a combination think tank of academics, of industry, of government, of other thought leaders, and it needs to be multidisciplinary so that we can take, if there is a data solution that a data scientist can bring forward, then that is a key component that we must bring into the mix. And I think that those are the issues. So when Peter talks about collecting data, if that data is not correctly correlated and reported upon, that data is useless. It brings no value to the entire system. Or in Dr. Nihara's case, in saying there's a collaboration perspective. We know that hydroxyurea has a rejection rate, and it can be as high as 10%. Then there needs to be a substitution mechanism that manufacturers for hydroxyurea need to work with, in saying that if this 10% of population is not responding or has adverse effects to hydroxyurea, how do we deal with it? Or in Lokesh's case, bringing in a new therapy or a existing therapy with a new dosing, and making it something that is can be created into liquid suspension so that younger children can take this dosing, that where we know that a 500 milligram dosing is way too high for those children, and that it does cause severe side effects, and so therefore not used at all. And early intervention, as we all know, is the key to this. Obviously, genetics, obviously awareness of genetics, and looking at how coupling is happening as far as reproduction, and making sure that that people are aware of the risks of the genetic side of the disease. But these are all very complex social issues. Yes. that are much more difficult to do, because going to an isolated tribe and trying to explain to them that you shouldn't marry how you've married for thousands of years is not so easy. And it does not build trust. Public health in general has a deficit of trust. So, and that's a global phenomena. That's not an Indian phenomena, it's a global phenomena. So how do you take new therapies or new advancements or repurposing of what you're bringing into the table and actually bring that message forward? And I think that this conversation that we've had today has been a starting point for industry to kind of come together. So I think my hope will be that the next cohort that we develop for this think tank will have both industry, academia, government, and other thought leaders, multidisciplinary thought leaders, so that we can actually genuinely come up with solutions, not just for siloed in pharmas, not siloed in testing, not siloed in epidemiology, not siloed in any area, but to actually converge these silos to create an actual genuine solution that can be implemented and is dynamic enough to be changed where required. As we know the genotypes and we know the challenges, the language barriers, the lifestyle barriers, the dietary restrictions, which have a direct impact on patients. So keeping all that in mind, I think that Professor Sabu, I wanted to thank you first and foremost. Obviously, you're a leading authority in putting together public health programs globally, and so thankful that you were able to take the time to come on. Peter, it's a pleasure to have you. It's like I said to you, the moment I heard about your product, I said this is something really special, and the mechanics of which we can speak at another time at a different panel, are so very complex that the fact that it was actually accomplished is an amazing thing. So and Lokesh, what we've learned about the other side of Novartis, of course, since we always look at big pharma as this nameless, faceless entity, and that we don't necessarily like, but you really have shown the human side of it and shown that pharma can make an impact. And Dr. Nehara, your dedication for a disease for your lifetime, and for bringing forward something that can be greatly beneficial and that will have a great amount of impact is certainly really, really appreciated. And I think that you're absolutely right. There's a collaborative approach that needs to be taken from global companies, so that, again, when there's a siloed approach, it's easy to sort of ignore or not take into seriousness the impact that these companies can have. But I think as a combined force, I think everybody will listen and everybody will understand that there are better technologies out there, that there are better solutions, and that these companies are interested in bringing these solutions into the sickle cell mission in India, and that we can create almost a model treatment program from detection to treatment, and actually have high levels of patient compliance if we are able to put all of these resources together. So thank you everyone for coming on board, and I really appreciate everyone being there. We will now hop on to our next panel, but we will continue this discussion, and I look forward to forming a local think tank with all of you as part of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you.
Everybody.